Hi there, it's Mike Madge back with Sailjuice.com, and today we got a special show on the DN. We've got two ladies joining us here today. Julie Richards from Traverse City, Michigan. Julie's 2014 Central Regional Champion in the DN class. And we've got Karen Binder all the way from Newport, Rhode Island. And Karen, in a few short years, has worked herself up to a Gold Fleet sailor in the DN class, which is quite a commendable task. So thank you both for joining us, and I appreciate you joining us. And we want to talk to you and get your feel on the sport here. So maybe to start us off, Julie, you've been doing this longer than Karen and myself, for that matter. So I just want you to start with how you got started with the sport.
Well, my husband started a year or two before I did, but Traverse City has had an active iceboat club here, the Grand Traverse Ice Yacht Club. So that kind of helped us get started in the sport. But some of his friends were iceboating, so he started doing it, and then I was kind of reluctant. I don't know, for some reason I wasn't that interested, but I did come out one day, nice sunny day, and he was kind of showing some of my friends how to sail an ice boat. And so I tried it, and a week later I had a boat. I was totally hooked. That was in the early 1990s, actually, when we started ice boating.
Wow, and we got a little surprise for you here. We got a picture of you rounding what looks like would be the weather mark, and that's from your winning regatta at the 2014 Central Regional Championship. What lake was this on when you won?
The Centrals was on the west arm of Grand Traverse Bay. It rarely freezes anymore, but 2 years in a row, both of the bays in Traverse City froze up, and there was over 2 feet of ice on those bays. It was really amazing. Miles of beautiful ice.
And you're looking fast in that picture right there. And if I'm correct, you won the Gold Fleet. Was it the Gold Fleet you won?
It was. Yes. Wow. And I always say that we didn't have a huge turnout for that race. I can't remember the reasons behind it, but I always say there was no one in the race or even there by the name of Sherry. You got to know that right up front.
Well, still, that's impressive.
It was light air. Light air is a little better for me than heavy wind.
Yeah. So maybe Karen, you can tell us now how you got started with the sport.
So I officially started about 3 years ago, but T and I went to college together and sailed on our college sailing team, and kept in touch and remained friends. And he always was telling me about ice boating. I'd always follow his adventures. I'd hear how well he did. And then the year that he went to Baikal, I really got intrigued with the idea of this sport and the traveling that's involved. And so about 3 years ago, he brought me out onto the ice locally. A pond had frozen, and I went into his older boat, and I'd never gone so fast on a body of water ever before. And I had the time, and I had the resources, and I had the interest and the sailing experience to get into it. And I love it.
Great. And I understand you had quite a run in softwater sailing. You've got quite a background in softwater sailing also.
Yeah, I went to a very good college that had a college that had a very good sailing team, and I was crew and a skipper for the dinghy team in 420s and FJs. And then after college, I did some big boat sailing, and then did a lot with J22s. And then I had my own laser, so I did frostbiting in the winter and competed. So I've always considered myself a racer. I love racing, and I love sailing, especially because men and women can compete together on a pretty level playing field.
Well, that frostbiting in the winter must have been some good preparation for getting you ready for ice boating in the winter then.
I know. T would always say he hates being cold, and I'm like, well, how can you go ice boating? And once I went ice boating, I realized that ice boating is actually warmer than frostbiting because the water doesn't hit you.
Yeah. Now, just so you think you have to have, an extensive soft water sailing background to get into ice boating. Julie, you said like you just played around with soft water sailing. Really, you didn't do any racing.
No, not any to speak of. I mean, a little bit, just fun races and some crewing on some club races at the yacht club, but not much at all. No.
Yeah. Now, I think you've both already mentioned this, but I mean, who, in terms of mentors, so when you're looking up to people in the sport or getting advice, who do you both, maybe starting with you, Julie, who do you lean on heavily for going to it for advice or even maintenance? Because, upkeeping a DN is quite a job.
Yeah, it sure is. And that's probably the one reason why I'm still in the sport and doing as well as I am is because my husband, Richard Wallum, most people know him as Dick Wallum. Well, he got me into it, and he's also a master woodworker. He's worked on old vintage wood boats all his life, and he's just really handy in a shop. And so he actually started making those stripper masts, we called them back in the day before we had fiberglass masts even. Was making them in his garage. I know Ron Sherry came up one time and we were checking out what he was doing. They were kind of talking about, how are we going to make masks that are a little bit more flexible? So he's been, he did everything for me in the beginning too, like to the point that he was setting my boat up for me. And finally I said, this has to stop. I'd roll out of bed late and come on down, both set up. This is just not acceptable. So, because I wasn't racing at the time and I wasn't really even interested in it at that point. So yeah, but he, from the get-go, I can't even imagine that I would have gotten into it without him.
Nice. And what about yourself, Karen? Who do you lean on heavily?
James Thieler has been really a mentor to me and a coach, and with the equipment helps basically build a boat from scratch for me. He's wonderful about making sure that I have the right equipment and recommendations. And then Steve Duhamel, who does a lot of the metal work and building runner bodies and sharpening my runners and encouragement. Jeff Kent has been incredibly helpful with getting me a wonderful hull. Steve Madden with a great mast. So the New England region has been really supportive of me because in New England, I'm probably the only female that's sailing and racing. And it's been a great motivator.
Nice. Now, just so we don't leave off, I mean, you're not the only two ladies at Iceboat. Who are maybe just Julie? You've been around long enough. Who's some of the other names that you've encountered as racing against?
Well, when I first started racing, and it was not my idea to start racing. We had a little club. We did, so they were doing club races. It got to the point we didn't have that many people racing, and we had to have 5 people on the line to start an official club race. So they'd go, Julie, just get on the line and start the race. You don't have to finish it, just get on the line. So I did, and that's how I started racing. But there weren't many women racing back then. And of course, Jane Pale comes to mind right away. She won a North Americans. I believe that's what she won back in the day. And she was still sailing, and she was, I don't know, probably in her 60s or 70s by the time I started doing this. And I thought, well, if she can do it, maybe I can do that. There weren't too many others. And then Kathy Fernbach, she's married to Paul Goodwin. She was racing out on the East Coast. And then I got to know her when they started coming and doing races. And I was so impressed. It's like, maybe I can do this.
Nice.
And there were a few others too. Yeah.
And when I went to Montana last year, which was my first North Americans, I was super impressed to meet Julie and to see her racing in the Gold Fleet, and seeing as Julie is petite and racing in those heavy conditions and doing so well, and then learning more about Julie and her racing. She's really been an inspiration to me. And right now there's one other woman that races regularly in the regattas, and that's Rhea Nicholas from Michigan.
Yeah.
And then at the Nationals this past year, there was one woman that is the name of Erin, and she's in her 20s.
Oh,
and she
yeah,
bought-
Aaron Berry. Yeah.
I think she bought your old boat, Julie.
No,
So
no, it's not mine. It's Jory Lennon or Jory Icewine. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
And
so-
she and I have been communicating a little bit because she thought maybe she'd get some tips on how to, you know, for a lightweight person, how to get the boat set up.
yeah, because she's light like you. She's tiny.
Yeah.
So, but
And-
I think it's a great sport, and I would say I would actually say, unlike softwater sailing, I find the men in ice boating to be much more welcoming than women at than men at softwater regattas, where it's, I don't know, there's a different vibe. Ice boaters, I think there's just a team spirit with ice boating. People just embrace people who join the sport.
I agree. Yep.
And you mentioned Yori Lennon there. It's she actually came up. We had the Canadian Nationals here in 2017, and she drove all the way up by herself. I was quite impressed. Drove all the way up by herself, and actually we had two ladies in that event. There's a lady in Thunder Bay here, Liz Petroni, that's quite active. She hasn't really traveled to any events yet, but she's a super keen ice boater. So it's great to see that. Now, I wanted to ask you, because I know myself, like, I mean, ice boating can bring a fairly harsh environment. You know, you're not down Bermuda sun tanning in between races. And I know from my own experience, and Julie knows this well, the first event I showed up at, I was totally unprepared for being outdoors. And I credit Julie, she got me through the weekend, hand warmers and parkas she lent me, and but I mean, it is a fairly harsh environment. So how do you handle that? Maybe Karen, we'll listen to you first.
I'm still experimenting with what kind of gear is best for the elements. I have the Henderson kind of neoprene suit that I wear when I'm racing, and then I've been wearing snow pants and jackets, and I've got the foot warmers, and I've got the Neos boots. I love the Neos boots. I could recommend those to everyone. And then I do get cold, but now I've got a Carhartt suit. But I think that it's just experimenting with different stuff. I find it's more when the wind blows really hard and there's blowing snow and the conditions look, you know, crazy. It's more intimidating to me than the actual feeling of cold. It's just kind of making sure that in heavy air conditions that I can not become overwhelmed by that and still keep my head in the race. Julie?
Yeah, I cannot imagine keeping warm in one of those racing suits, and I don't have one, and I will probably, I'm not planning on getting one at this point in my life. Someone tried to give me one time, and it was way, way, way too big. It's, no, I don't think I really am into the racing suit, but I don't really need to pare down what I'm wearing to fit in my boat as much as some people do. And I know that's an issue for, you know, the bigger men. I mean, I don't know how they fit in those boats. They're not that big.
No.
So I kind of slop around in mine just a little bit, but I've got it figured out. But yeah, I a lot of warmers. They make body warmers, you know, the big patch size ones. And I use those, but yeah, I'm dressed pretty warm.
Now, with sailing the DN, I mean, unlike, you know, if I can compare it to the laser, you know, most ladies compete with laser radials. They got their own, you know, not that men don't compete there too, but I mean, you know, if you're underweight, you get a smaller sail, you can compete with a radial. I mean, the DN is a DN, so the sail area is the same, the hull size is the same. What sort of special things do you have on your boat or set up with your boat that makes it more adaptable for a female to sail? Then maybe Karen, if you can start with your boat.
So I'm on my second boat right now, and my first boat was a traditional wooden hull with a plank that I just purchased used, and a mast that was available. So it was a bunch of different components that got put together. And I felt that whole first season that I was really fighting my boat to keep it, you know, keep the windward runner down, and just my body was aching after I was sailing it. I couldn't get the mast to pop. I thought it was just, I'm sure it was a combination of me being a novice but I've learned it was probably more about the boat not being really tuned to my weight size. I flew out of the boat at the windward mark or the leeward mark. I had all these catastrophes my first season. And that ended, actually, I was in a collision. But the good news from that, and the person, we settled it, and I got a great new hull. I got a Jeff Kent hull, which it just seems to fit my body better. And I put a little bit of a step for my feet as a footrest farther at back. And I still have the ladder system for my other footrests, but the cockpit was too long for my height. So now I can really get my feet in. I can really crank in on my main sheet. I worked a lot on the plank with T and softened it. I got a softer mast. And now I don't struggle with my boat nearly as much and can go out in really heavy breeze. So I think if somebody's struggling with their boat, it means their boat isn't tuned to them properly. That would be what I would say. Julie?
I agree. I since I switched from a fiberglass mast to carbon, I have still been struggling a little bit. I've never quite gotten it. I don't know. I just really struggle with the tuning sometimes because it still can be a problem for me, especially when there's sticky snow on the ice. So the boat doesn't want to go forward, so it wants to go up, and I don't have enough weight to hold it down. So the mast sometimes won't get bent out before that happens. So I am still fighting it sometimes. And so we're still working on it. It's like, oh, well, there might be another mast in the future. It's like, how many have I had? I haven't had that many, but it is kind of tricky. And I have a minimum weight boat that my husband built. It's a very nice boat. And people are going, well, don't you want a heavier boat so you can, keep it down? Well, no, I have to push this thing off the line. And the heavier it is, I don't have a lot of mass to push the boat. So my starts are also an issue. I do feel like, especially if there's any sticky snow on the ice, it gets packed down there or anything, really hard for me to get that boat off the line with my short legs and my lack of much body weight to push it.
Now, and in terms of the loads on the boat, so basically you're telling me if your boat's set up right, and the mast is bending properly, then you don't find the loads any excess, like any lady really should be able to handle any of the loads on the main sheet?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice. And
Yeah,
Karen, I understand, speaking of starting, you've been really training hard in that aspect of it. Do you find, now that would maybe, just from my perspective, would be one place where I think the men might have a bit of an advantage. Is that right, on the starting line, or?
Well, so when I started racing, I was pushing my boat and I was running hard, and I wasn't sliding into my boat very easily, and I wasn't building speed. I'd get kind of shot out the back. And I know, like with laser sailing, a start is like 80% of the race. It's just so critical for a good start. So last season, I had made this decision. I read this book a long time ago when I was in college sailing about Buddy Melges, and he would go out and he would practice 100 tacks, 100 jives. And I said, okay, well, I'll practice 100 starts. So in about a month's time, we were fortunate we had enough ice. And I went out and I practiced 100 times, starting from, a stop and starting and sliding into my boat and learning how to build speed. And that worked really well. And then I heard about the infamous Matt Struble DN video this past summer. I heard about that. And so I watched his starts and I looked at his body position. And it's interesting that you did a video with him a couple weeks ago, because I was noticing what he was doing. And I was trying to get faster in my sprints with like low recovery foot time. And I don't want to take up too much time here, but T and I were really practicing on our starts, because he struggled with his starts a little bit too. And we were at the track one night and I saw this girl who, she was the fastest runner I'd ever seen in my entire life. And I approached her and I asked her if she would coach us. And she reluctantly said she would think about it. And then 3 weeks later, she contacted me. And it turns out, I had no idea, but it turns out she competed in the Olympics in the sprinting for Guam. And we had like 5 training sessions with her, and really learned a lot. And I knocked a second off my 40-yard dash, which is huge. So I don't think in this case, I don't think men have an advantage. Maybe Matt Struble would still beat me on the line, I'm sure. But getting off the line and getting into my boat, I feel I'm pretty competitive with most everyone out there. It's the building speed I now have to work on.
So now, it all sounds very positive. So any other advice or tips you'd have for females that are thinking about getting into this DN sport? Is there anything you can add?
I think to Julie's point, Julie has Dick as kind of her technician to help her with her boat and do all those things. I have T, and I think it's such a great sport, but I think that it's very technical, and I think it can become overwhelming if you don't have either one person or a group of people kind of giving you the advice and passing on that knowledge. And fortunately, there are so many people who are willing to share that, but I think that can be a barrier if you don't have someone to help you along, because it's such a nebulous sport in some ways. Julie, I don't know if you have anything.
Well, if you can find a local club in your area, that is the way to get hooked up with people that can help. And we often, when we could have in-person meetings, we'd often move a meeting to someone's shop, and there would be always a demonstration as part of the meeting. Like if someone wanted to know a little bit more about sharpening runners or whatever it might be. And you can hook up with mentors that way, and hopefully be able to find someone that will, and a lot of people, especially a lot of women, maybe don't have shops and all those tools and maybe all that kind of knowledge. So not that they can't, because like Jory, she built her own boat. I was so highly impressed when she came on the scene and she said she built that boat. I said, oh my gosh, that's just, but yeah, if you can find a local club, get hooked up with people that can help you.
Yeah. And
that seems to be something in the Midwest. There are more ice boating clubs that have regular meetings and get-togethers. That doesn't happen so much in New England, maybe because we're more spread out and there's fewer of us. But that's terrific in the Midwest.
Our club has dwindled a bit, I have to say. We don't have a lot of members anymore, but I don't know, they're coming back. Wintertime comes around and we start getting some ice. We'll have a Zoom meeting tomorrow night, and the first one we had, only 4 people showed up, but the last one we had, I think there were 10. So we'll see.
Well, that was exciting. I enjoyed talking to both of you, and you both made it sound very positive, and hopefully more ladies get into the sport. I know I enjoy, Karen, I haven't met you personally, but Julie, you've always been delightful to meet, and you and your husband, I look forward to meeting you again next year. I am going to leave you with one bit of trivia, though. 2 girls. So Julie, you kind of gave part of that away. I was going to ask if a lady has ever won a North American championship, but we've identified that now as Jane Pagel.
Well, I was going to look it up to make sure I have that straight, but I believe so.
Well, you do. So this is the second part of the trivia. Second part of the trivia, she's actually won it twice. And now this might be dating you a bit, Karen, and probably you too, Julie, but can anybody name those years?
It was a long time ago. Well, the first one I know of was a long time ago. She was in her 20s, I think, in that first one.
1970?
Any guesses?
64.
My husband, 1964.
Oh, your husband's pretty darn close. It was 1960 and 1963 she won that. I researched that, so I got that on from research, but I think it's long overdue. So you ladies are obviously an inspiration, so maybe it's time again for a lady to step up and win a North Americans, and if not you two, then hopefully we've inspired, or you've inspired some new female sailors into the sport, and I appreciate your time, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mike.
Mike.